The restaurant was buzzing with energy, though it was not the usual kind. This was a private event, and the tension in the air made it different from any ordinary evening shift. The woman had worked in this place for years, and she knew the rhythms of the tables, the smiles of the regular customers, the polite nods of the occasional visitors. But tonight, everything felt different. She had heard whispers about the man who would be attending, the one whose name alone could make people tremble. The staff avoided talking about him in front of her, but she could sense the fear even before she saw him. Everyone was preparing for a man who was both respected and feared in the city, a figure whose presence could silence an entire room without a single word. She adjusted her uniform for the 100th time, trying to calm her nerves. Her hands felt sweaty, and she could feel her heart beating faster than normal. She told herself to focus on her task, to make sure every tray, every drink, every plate was perfect. That was what she was good at. That was what she had always relied on. She moved through the crowd with practiced ease, carrying glasses and dishes, smiling politely at the guests, but her mind kept wandering back to the man who had not yet arrived. The rumors about him were endless. Some said he had built his power from nothing. Others said he had an iron fist, punishing anyone who dared cross him. Yet others claimed he could be surprisingly fair if approached the right way. She tried to block all these thoughts, telling herself she only had to serve, nothing more. Just serve, just stay out of trouble. The doors opened, and the man stepped inside. Time seemed to slow for a moment. He was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a confidence that immediately drew the attention of everyone in the room. People straightened in their seats, lowered their voices, and even the waitstaff found themselves holding their breath. He had a presence that filled the room, a quiet power that demanded respect. The woman felt a shiver run down her spine as he scanned the room, his eyes sharp and calculating. He stopped briefly, acknowledging some people with a nod, and she could see the reactions of those around him. Some smiled nervously, some avoided eye contact, some whispered hurriedly. The woman kept her distance, trying to remind herself that she had a job to do. She had to serve, and she could not let fear take control. She moved with care, balancing a tray filled with drinks. She navigated between tables, careful not to bump into anyone. Her mind was focused, her eyes fixed on her path. But just as she approached the table where he was seated, her foot caught on the edge of the carpet. For a split second, panic flashed through her mind. The tray tilted, and in that instant water spilled from a glass. It splashed across the table and landed on the man himself. Time froze for her. She could hear the gasp of the nearby guests, the sudden silence that followed, the sound of liquid hitting the floor. She felt her face flush, her hands trembling. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the kitchen, to never be seen again. The man did not react immediately. He looked down at his soaked suit, then at her, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Everyone was waiting for an explosion, expecting anger, shouting, maybe even violence. The woman could barely breathe, her mind racing with thoughts of what she should say, how she could apologize. Her words stumbled as she tried to explain herself, her voice shaking. She could see the fear in the eyes of the other staff members, the rigid posture of the guests, the tense anticipation that hung in the air. It was as if the room had contracted, and the only thing that mattered was the man and the spilled water. She knelt quickly, grabbing napkins and a cloth, trying to clean up the mess as fast as she could. Her hands moved faster than she had ever moved before, fumbling with the wet items, knocking over a salt shaker in her haste. She muttered apologies, hoping that her voice could somehow convey the panic she felt inside. Her mind was spinning with thoughts of what could happen next. She remembered the warnings, the stories she had heard from colleagues, the tales of people who had angered this man before. She tried to imagine the worst, and every scenario made her stomach turn. The man remained seated, watching her work, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, and she felt like hours had passed in seconds. He did not move, did not speak, did not indicate what was going through his mind. Every movement she made seemed exaggerated under his gaze. She tried to control her breathing, to steady her shaking hands, to make herself as small and invisible as possible. But his presence was overwhelming, a force that she could not ignore, no matter how hard she tried. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. His voice was calm, low, and measured, carrying a weight that made everyone in the room listen. "It's just water," he said, and for a moment, the world seemed to shift. She blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. The guests relaxed slightly, and the staff dared to exhale. Her heart was still pounding, but she felt a flicker of hope. He was not screaming. He was not angry. He was not lashing out. She could hardly believe it. She kept cleaning, her movements more careful now, but with a strange sense of relief. She realized that she had survived the moment that could have been disastrous. She looked up at him briefly, and he nodded slightly, an almost imperceptible gesture, but enough to signal that he had acknowledged her effort to fix the mistake. The tension in the room began to ease, though it was replaced by a new kind of awe. The man had shown control, had shown that his power was not only in fear, but also in his unpredictability. He had reminded everyone present that he was to be respected, not simply feared. The woman continued her work, more alert than ever, but with a new understanding. She had seen a glimpse of how he operated, how he assessed situations, how he maintained his dominance without resorting to immediate anger. She realized that working in this environment required more than skill with trays and plates. It required awareness, composure, and the ability to adapt under pressure. Every step she took after that was calculated, every gesture cautious but confident. She had survived the first test, and though she did not know it yet, the day was far from over. By the time the event was winding down, she felt exhausted but strangely exhilarated. She had faced a situation that most would have dreaded, and she had emerged without disaster. She cleaned the last table, returned the remaining items to the kitchen, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. The memory of the spilled water would stay with her, not as a source of shame, but as a reminder of how quickly life could turn, how close danger could come, and how survival often depended on staying calm under pressure. As she stepped out of the restaurant at the end of her shift, the night air felt refreshing. She reflected on what had happened, replaying the scene in her mind. She knew that this encounter was something she would never forget, a story that would stay with her for years. She understood that the man's reaction had taught her an important lesson. Not just about him, but about people, about fear, and about herself. She had faced a moment of intense fear, and she had endured it. And in that endurance, she had discovered a strength she had not known she possessed. The moment felt suspended in time. The woman froze in place, her hands still trembling from the accident, as all eyes remained fixed on the Mafia boss. He sat in his chair, his expression unreadable, making it impossible to guess what he was thinking. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the soft clinking of glassware. Everyone waited, holding their breath, expecting the worst. Even seasoned staff who had worked under pressure for years seemed tense, as if the very air around them had thickened. She wanted to apologize again, but the words felt trapped in her throat. She could feel the sweat running down her back and her stomach twisting into knots. The spilled water, which seemed so small a mistake, had suddenly become the center of a storm she had no way of controlling. She glanced around, noticing the reactions of the people near her. Some of them were frozen like statues, their eyes wide with fear. Others tried to mask their concern, pretending to be calm, but their clenched jaws and stiff shoulders betrayed them. She realized that everyone in the room was watching, waiting for the Mafia boss to show his reaction. The power he held over the room was unmistakable. He remained silent for what seemed like an eternity. His dark eyes followed her movements as she quickly tried to clean the mess. She knelt and grabbed napkins, mopping up the water as fast as she could. She kept apologizing, her voice shaky, trying to explain that it was an accident. Her words were rushed, spilling over each other, but it seemed as if he did not hear her. He was assessing her, silently measuring her character, and the intensity of his gaze made her feel exposed. She felt as though every mistake she had ever made in her life was being weighed in this moment. The guests at the table were tense as well. Some whispered quietly to each other, sharing stories of his temper, of people who had angered him in the past, and of the consequences they had faced. Others simply stared, unable to look away, fascinated by the drama unfolding before them. The woman could sense their curiosity, their fear, and their respect all at once. The air was thick with suspense, and she felt the weight of it pressing down on her chest. She wondered how long she could last like this before something went wrong. Her mind raced, trying to come up with a solution, a way to smooth over the situation. She considered leaving the room entirely, but that would have been worse. Abandoning her post in front of such a powerful man could be seen as disrespect. She knew she had to face the moment, to handle it with care, even if she had no idea what he would do next. She tried to steady her hands, to take a deep breath, to calm her racing heart, but the fear was stubborn. She had never felt anything like it before. The Mafia boss leaned back slightly, tilting his head, and the silence became heavier. He had not yet spoken, and the pause felt deliberate. It was clear he was aware of the impact his reaction would have, not just on her, but on everyone in the room. His silence carried authority. It was a reminder that he was in control, that the room responded to him alone. The woman realized that this moment was more than just about the spilled water. It was a test of composure, a lesson in reading the unspoken rules of power. She understood that her survival depended not on speed or apologies, but on awareness and patience. The staff nearby were frozen, unsure whether to intervene or step back. They watched the interaction between the woman and the Mafia boss with a mix of fear and admiration. Some of them had worked for him before, and they understood the subtle signals, the meaning behind a glance or a shift in posture. They could see that he was assessing her reaction, measuring her courage and adaptability. The woman, unaware of the lessons she was about to learn, simply focused on cleaning the water, her movements precise but anxious. A waiter approached, offering assistance, but he was stopped by a sharp look from the Mafia boss. The gesture was small, almost casual, but it carried an unspoken command. The woman understood immediately that she needed to continue on her own. She felt a strange mix of fear and determination. The realization that she had to manage the situation herself made her nervous, but it also gave her a sense of control. She focused entirely on the task at hand, her attention fully on the spilled water and the table it had touched. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. She worked quickly but carefully, dabbing at the liquid and moving the items out of harm's way. Her heart was still racing, but she could feel herself slowly regaining composure. She realized that she had survived the initial shock and that the moment of immediate danger had passed. Yet the tension in the room did not completely fade. The guests remained alert, the staff cautious, and she continued to feel the weight of the Mafia boss's gaze. Then, in a voice that was calm and deliberate, he spoke. "Accidents happen," he said, his words simple but powerful. The effect was immediate. The room seemed to exhale as if a long-held breath had been released. The guests relaxed slightly, the staff's shoulders lowered, and the woman felt a wave of relief wash over her. She blinked, unable to believe that the man who had inspired so much fear could respond with such unexpected calm. It was not mercy, she realized, but a demonstration of control. He had shown that power was not just about anger, but about choosing the right moment to respond. The woman continued cleaning more carefully now, aware of the subtle lesson being taught. She noticed the way the Mafia boss observed her, the way his presence influenced the room even without a single outburst. She understood that survival and respect in his world depended on more than just skill. It required awareness, patience, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. Every move she made was deliberate, measured, and attentive. She could feel the room watching, but she was beginning to feel more confident in her actions. As she worked, she reflected on the stories she had heard about him. Some said he was ruthless, others that he could be fair, and now she realized that both could be true. He was unpredictable, yes, but he was also deliberate. He chose his moments, and he measured the reactions of those around him. The woman felt a strange sense of admiration, even in the midst of fear. She had witnessed a demonstration of human psychology, of power and control, that she would not forget. When the table was finally clean, she stepped back, feeling exhausted but accomplished. The water had been removed, the table restored, and the tension had eased. The Mafia boss gave a slight nod, acknowledging her efforts. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it carried meaning. The room seemed to recognize it too, and the guests and staff shifted, their own tension easing as they realized that the moment had passed without incident. She took a moment to collect herself, adjusting her uniform and wiping her hands. She allowed herself a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline slowly fade. The fear had not disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into a heightened awareness. She understood now that working in this environment required constant attention, respect for power, and the ability to adapt quickly. She had survived the first true test of the evening, and though she did not know it yet, the night would present more challenges. As the guests continued with their event, she moved through the room with more confidence. She knew that she had faced a moment that could have been disastrous, and she had managed it. The lesson was clear. Composure, attentiveness, and calm under pressure were invaluable. She had learned that the most dangerous situations often revealed the most important truths about human behavior. And she knew that this experience, this encounter with the Mafia boss, would stay with her forever, shaping the way she approached life, work, and fear in the years to come. The woman felt her legs shake slightly as she stood near the table, trying to recover from the earlier panic. The room had returned to a cautious normalcy, but she could still feel the weight of the Mafia boss's eyes on her. Even though he had spoken, even though he had allowed her to continue without punishment, there was an undeniable power in the way he carried himself. It was not the kind of power that could be measured in numbers or authority, but one that seeped into the air and made everyone aware of their place. She could sense it in the way the guests moved slightly when he shifted in his seat, in the careful steps of the staff as they attended to other tables, and in the quiet murmur of conversation that seemed almost rehearsed. She took a deep breath, telling herself that the worst was over, that she had survived the moment that had seemed so impossible just minutes ago. Her hands were still trembling, but her mind was beginning to clear. She realized that he was not angry, not in the way people expected, but that did not mean the situation was without risk. Every glance, every small gesture he made could carry meaning, and she had to remain aware. She moved carefully, making sure her steps were measured and her actions deliberate. She did not want to make another mistake, even a small one, that could change the course of the evening. The Mafia boss leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed but alert. He did not speak immediately again, but his presence filled the space in a way that could not be ignored. The woman noticed the subtle changes in his demeanor, the way his eyes shifted slightly as he observed the room, the way his fingers tapped quietly on the table. It was as if he was communicating without words, sending signals to those around him. She realized that this was a man who understood the power of perception, who knew that fear and respect were tools that could be used strategically. She felt a mix of awe and nervousness, knowing that she was witnessing a master of human behavior in action. Guests continued their conversations, but with a noticeable caution. Some were more animated, trying to cover up their apprehension, while others spoke in hushed tones, aware that any sudden movement could draw attention. The woman continued to serve, moving between tables with care, her hands steady despite the lingering tension. She caught glimpses of the Mafia boss watching her, assessing her movements, and she felt a strange sense of being tested. It was not a test she had asked for, but one she had to navigate with skill and composure. As she moved, she reflected on the lessons of the evening. She had learned quickly that fear could be as powerful as kindness, that silence could hold more weight than words, and that unpredictability was a force to respect. She realized that surviving this environment required more than just quick reflexes. It demanded an understanding of human nature, an ability to read subtle cues, and the capacity to remain calm when every instinct screamed otherwise. She reminded herself that she was capable, that she had managed the initial crisis, and that she could handle whatever came next if she remained focused. The Mafia boss finally spoke again, breaking the silence in a way that was both calm and commanding. "You handled that well," he said, his voice steady, almost casual, yet carrying a weight that made everyone listen. The words were simple, but their effect was profound. The woman blinked, barely able to comprehend what she had just heard. Relief and disbelief washed over her in equal measure. She had expected reprimand, anger, or punishment, but instead, she had been acknowledged for her efforts. The recognition, coming from such a formidable figure, was more powerful than she could have imagined. She continued her duties, her movements more deliberate and confident. The acknowledgement from the Mafia boss gave her a sense of control she had not felt before. She realized that respect could be earned, even in moments of fear, and that composure under pressure could change the course of events. She began to understand that the man's actions were not just about authority, but about teaching lessons, about shaping the behavior of those around him in subtle, unforgettable ways. The room slowly settled back into a rhythm, though the tension never fully disappeared. The guests were still cautious, the staff still attentive, but there was a new energy in the air, a sense of having survived a test and learned from it. The woman felt a quiet pride in herself, a recognition that she had navigated a dangerous moment with skill and grace. She moved with renewed focus, aware that every step mattered, every action observed, and that she had an opportunity to demonstrate her competence and composure. She noticed small gestures from the Mafia boss, subtle signs of approval that were almost imperceptible but meaningful. A nod here, a relaxed posture there, a brief smile that passed quickly across his face. Each signal was a reminder that he was constantly observing, evaluating, and understanding those around him. The woman realized that she was learning more than just how to serve drinks and clean tables. She was learning about human behavior, about power, about respect, and about the importance of presence and awareness in every action. As the evening progressed, she continued to move through the room, maintaining her focus and composure. She spoke politely to the guests, delivered orders with care, and managed her tasks with precision. She was aware of every glance, every subtle cue, and every shift in the room's energy. Each moment was a chance to demonstrate her capability, to navigate a delicate environment, and to maintain a sense of calm under pressure. She understood that these lessons would stay with her for the rest of her life, shaping the way she approached challenges, authority, and fear. The Mafia boss observed quietly, his presence a constant reminder of the delicate balance of the evening. She noticed the way he interacted with others, how his words were measured, how his actions carried weight without being overtly aggressive. He was a master of influence, of subtle control, and the woman realized that surviving and thriving in this environment required a combination of awareness, respect, and adaptability. By the end of the evening, she felt exhausted but empowered. She had faced a situation that most people would have dreaded, and she had navigated it successfully. The lessons of the night were clear. Composure, attentiveness, and awareness were invaluable, and fear, while powerful, could be managed with understanding and skill. She had survived a moment that could have been catastrophic and had emerged stronger, more confident, and more aware of the complexities of human behavior. As she left the restaurant, the cool night air felt refreshing, a contrast to the intensity of the evening. She reflected on the experience, replaying the events in her mind, and recognized the growth that had occurred in just a few short hours. She had faced fear, managed a crisis, and learned lessons that would stay with her forever. The encounter with the Mafia boss had taught her more than she could have imagined, revealing truths about human nature, power, and the subtle ways in which respect and fear are balanced. She knew that this experience would influence her decisions, her awareness, and her approach to challenges for years to come. The night had been intense, but it had also been transformative, leaving her with a newfound understanding of herself, the world around her, and the delicate dance of human interaction in high-stakes situations. The woman spent the next few hours moving through the restaurant, serving guests, clearing tables, and trying to maintain a calm appearance. Inside, however, her mind was racing, reflecting on what had happened earlier. The incident with the spilled water kept replaying in her thoughts. Each time she remembered the panic she had felt, she also recalled the calm way the Mafia boss had responded. It had been unexpected, almost shocking, and yet it had taught her something important about human behavior. She realized that the power he held over people did not come only from fear. It came from unpredictability, from knowing how to control the room without raising his voice or making threats. The way he had handled the situation with her was a lesson in strategy, patience, and awareness. She began to see how he used silence, subtle gestures, and measured responses to influence the people around him. She understood that respect and fear were intertwined, but not in the way she had imagined. It was a delicate balance, and he seemed to have mastered it completely. As she moved from table to table, she paid attention to the small details she had missed before. The guests, even those who seemed relaxed, were watching carefully, noticing the slightest change in his expression or posture. The staff around her, experienced as they were, also appeared tense, aware that any mistake could have consequences. She felt a renewed sense of caution, realizing that her actions were being observed not just for efficiency but for character and composure. Each step she took, each tray she carried, each interaction she had with a guest became a small test of her ability to stay calm and collected. She began to think about what she had learned so far. Accidents were inevitable, but how one responded to them could make all the difference. Fear could be managed, but it required awareness and quick thinking. The Mafia boss had shown her that strength was not always loud or aggressive. Sometimes it was quiet, deliberate, and controlled. She felt a sense of respect for him, even though she had feared him moments earlier. It was a complex emotion, a mixture of relief, admiration, and lingering nervousness. During a brief pause, she found herself near the bar, taking a moment to steady her hands and collect her thoughts. The adrenaline from the earlier incident was fading, replaced by a thoughtful calm. She watched the Mafia boss from a distance, noticing the subtle ways he interacted with his surroundings. His gestures were small but meaningful, each movement purposeful. He nodded at someone across the room, exchanged a few words with a guest, and adjusted his posture slightly, all without appearing to draw attention. She realized that he was constantly in control, even when it seemed he was relaxed. She reflected on her own behavior, thinking about how she had reacted in those critical moments. Her fear had been intense, almost overwhelming, but she had managed to act despite it. She had cleaned the spill, apologized, and maintained composure, even when every instinct told her to run or hide. She understood that those actions mattered, that the way she carried herself under pressure was being noticed. It was a humbling realization, but also empowering. She had survived a test she did not even know she was taking, and she had passed. As the evening continued, she noticed the subtle cues from the Mafia boss that seemed to guide her behavior without direct instruction. A small nod, a shift in his gaze, a glance that lingered just long enough to convey awareness. She felt a sense of being seen, evaluated, and understood. It was not threatening, but it was intense. She realized that these moments were teaching her lessons about attention, awareness, and the importance of presence. Every interaction, no matter how small, had meaning, and she had to remain alert and responsive. She also noticed how the guests responded to him. Some were clearly nervous, careful not to say or do anything that might provoke a negative reaction. Others were more confident, perhaps familiar with him, but even they seemed to measure their words and actions carefully. She understood that the environment was one where behavior was constantly observed and judged. The lessons she was learning went beyond her immediate tasks. They were about understanding people, reading situations, and navigating spaces where power and influence were significant forces. During a quiet moment, she approached a table to serve dessert, her hands steady but her mind alert. She saw a young couple whispering nervously, glancing at the Mafia boss and then at her. She smiled politely, placing the plates in front of them, and offered a brief, courteous comment. They relaxed slightly under her attention, and she felt a small sense of accomplishment. She realized that her ability to remain calm and polite under pressure was helping to ease the tension in the room. Even small gestures could have an impact, and she began to see the value in maintaining composure and awareness at all times. The rest of the staff also seemed more focused, more careful. There was a shared understanding of the stakes, a recognition that the presence of the Mafia boss changed the dynamics of the room. She observed how the waiters and assistants moved, their attention to detail, their subtle efforts to avoid mistakes. It reminded her that everyone was navigating the same environment, learning lessons in real time about observation, patience, and control. She felt a sense of solidarity with them, even as she continued to focus on her individual tasks. As the evening drew to a close, the woman reflected on the experiences of the night. She thought about the spilled water, the fear that had gripped her, and the calm, deliberate response of the Mafia boss. She understood that what had happened was more than an accident. It was a moment of learning, a chance to observe human behavior and to understand the nuances of power, respect, and fear. She had seen firsthand how a person in control could influence the atmosphere, guide behavior, and teach lessons without raising a hand or a voice. She also realized how much she had grown in just a few hours. Her awareness had increased, her understanding of human nature had deepened, and her ability to remain calm under pressure had strengthened. She had faced a situation that could have been overwhelming and had navigated it successfully. She knew that these lessons would stay with her, shaping her actions, reactions, and understanding of the world around her for years to come. By the time the last guest left, she felt a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. The night had been intense, challenging, and enlightening. She had survived moments of fear, learned valuable lessons about human behavior, and gained insights into the subtle ways in which power and respect operated. She understood that the experience had changed her, not just in the immediate sense, but in a way that would influence her approach to life and work in the future. As she stepped outside into the cool night air, she felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. The adrenaline of the evening had faded, leaving her with clarity and reflection. She thought about the Mafia boss, about his calm, deliberate actions, and about the lessons she had learned. She realized that life often presented unexpected challenges, but that composure, awareness, and understanding could guide one through even the most intimidating situations. The night had been a test, a learning experience, and a moment of personal growth that she would never forget. She knew that the experience would stay with her forever, a story of fear, resilience, and insight into the complexity of human behavior. By the time the restaurant was empty, the woman felt the exhaustion of the evening weighing on her body, but there was also a strange sense of satisfaction and relief. The air was quiet, almost still, a contrast to the tension that had filled the room just hours ago. She moved through the tables, cleaning the last few spots and organizing items that had been moved during the evening. Her hands were tired, but her mind was alert, reflecting on everything that had happened. The spilled water, the panic, the calm response of the Mafia boss, and the lessons she had learned. All of it played through her thoughts like a vivid memory she could not forget. She remembered the initial fear that had gripped her when the water spilled. Her heart had pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. She had been frozen, unable to predict what would happen next, imagining every possible consequence. And then he had responded, not with anger, not with threats, but with an unexpected calm. That moment had changed everything. She realized that power and fear were not always what they seemed. True control came from the ability to remain calm, to assess situations, and to influence outcomes without unnecessary aggression. She understood that she had been given a glimpse into a world she had never fully understood, a world where human behavior and decision-making were observed and evaluated at every moment. As she wiped down the tables and stacked chairs, she thought about how the Mafia boss had observed her the entire time. Every movement, every gesture, every small mistake had been noticed. She realized that this attention was not meant to intimidate alone. It was a form of guidance, a test, and a lesson in awareness. She had learned the importance of paying attention to detail, of reading subtle cues, and of maintaining composure even in the most stressful situations. The skills she had practiced unintentionally tonight would serve her in countless situations in the future. She knew. She paused for a moment to catch her breath, glancing around the empty restaurant. The lights reflected off the polished surfaces, and the quiet hum of the appliances reminded her of the stark contrast between the calm now and the tension from earlier. She thought about how quickly situations could escalate and how important it was to remain composed. She felt a sense of pride in herself, realizing that she had managed a situation that could have ended badly. Her hands still trembled slightly from the adrenaline, but her mind was clear, focused, and thoughtful. Her reflections turned to the guests and staff. Everyone had played a role, even if unknowingly, in the delicate balance of the evening. The guests, careful and observant, had followed the cues of the environment. The staff had worked together to maintain order and composure, and she had been at the center, directly experiencing the unpredictability of the situation. She thought about how each person had contributed to the energy of the room, and she recognized that navigating such an environment required not just skill but understanding and awareness. She remembered the small gestures from the Mafia boss, the subtle acknowledgments that she had noticed. A nod here, a brief smile there, a glance that lingered just long enough to signal approval or recognition. These gestures had communicated more than words ever could. She realized that understanding these subtle cues was essential, not only in high-stakes situations like tonight, but in everyday interactions as well. People often communicated more through actions than through words, and noticing those details could make all the difference. Her thoughts wandered to the lessons she had learned about fear and respect. Fear could be paralyzing, but it could also be managed through composure and awareness. Respect could be earned, not demanded, through actions and presence. She understood that true understanding of human behavior required observation, reflection, and adaptability. The Mafia boss had demonstrated this through his calm yet powerful approach, teaching her without speaking directly about it. She felt a newfound appreciation for the complexity of people and the importance of understanding them deeply. She moved to the kitchen to put away the last of the supplies, thinking about how much she had grown tonight. Her ability to remain calm under pressure, to think clearly in a tense moment, and to act with purpose had been tested in ways she had never experienced before. She realized that these experiences had made her stronger, more confident, and more aware. She had learned that even in the face of fear, one could find clarity and strength. As she finished her tasks, she reflected on how she would carry these lessons forward. She would approach challenges differently, paying closer attention to the people around her, to the subtle cues in their behavior, and to her own responses. She understood that life would present unexpected situations, and that her ability to remain composed and aware would determine how she navigated them. The evening had been a profound teacher, offering lessons that went beyond the confines of the restaurant or the incident with the water. Stepping outside, the cool night air felt refreshing. She inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the day lift slightly from her shoulders. The streets were quiet, the city lights flickering in the distance, and the normal sounds of night reminded her that the chaos of the restaurant was behind her. Yet the lessons remained, vivid in her mind, shaping the way she thought about herself and the world. She felt a quiet gratitude for having survived the situation, for having learned from it, and for having gained insight into human behavior and the nature of power. She walked slowly, reflecting on how fear and respect were intertwined in subtle ways. She understood now that fear did not always lead to control, and that respect was earned through actions, observation, and composure. She had seen this play out tonight, had experienced it firsthand, and had learned to recognize it. It was a lesson she would carry with her, one that would influence her choices, her awareness, and her interactions for years to come. The woman thought about the Mafia boss one last time before leaving the area. She realized that his calm and measured response had not only saved her from immediate danger, but had also taught her about human psychology and the power of subtle influence. She felt a sense of awe, mixed with relief, that she had been allowed to experience such a lesson firsthand. She understood that the night had been transformative, offering insights that she could never have learned from books or lectures alone. As she reached her home, she reflected on the entire sequence of events. The panic, the fear, the careful actions, and the calm acknowledgement had all contributed to a journey of growth and understanding. She knew that life would present similar challenges in unexpected forms, and that the skills she had practiced tonight, awareness, composure, attentiveness, would help her navigate those moments. The experience had not only tested her but had strengthened her, preparing her for the future in ways she had never imagined. Finally, she allowed herself to rest, feeling a sense of accomplishment and gratitude. The night had been intense, frightening, and enlightening. She had faced fear, learned valuable lessons, and emerged with a clearer understanding of human behavior and the subtle dynamics of respect and power. She understood that these lessons were priceless, that they would stay with her forever, and that they would guide her through life in countless ways. The night had been more than an experience. It had been a transformation, leaving her wiser, stronger, and more aware of the world and the people in it. She knew that she would never forget the spilled water, the fear it caused, and the calm yet powerful response of the man who had unknowingly become her teacher.